Tip 6, use layers, masking, and grouping as often as possible. Yeah, don't feel like you're in Photoshop and you're like, man, if I use more than 3 layers, someone's gonna, come. It's not okay. In my images, I use tons and tons and tons of layers. I'll have images that have 100 different layers on them. Not a big deal. I recommend using them because if I paint something on a layer, like I did here, okay, I can always go back and decide to change that. I can always go back and decide to make this layer visible or invisible. Even if it's 10 years from now, I can do whatever I want, and it's always going to allow me to change this, as long as I'm saving a layered file. So we do have a couple of layers here that let's go ahead and wind up using these layers, and I'll show you a little bit about layers and masking and groups and things like that. Okay, so we've got our background. We can change our background. Right now it's got a lock on it because it's our background layer. I want to hold the Alt or the Option key and double click on that. It's going to unlock it. So easy to group things together. Just hit Control or Command G, and that's going to allow you to group things together. So when I'm working on an image, I really like to name my groups. I don't name my layers so much. It's a little bit faster just to group similar layers together and to name those groups. All right, let's just group this one, okay, with itself, and I'm going to call this retouch, because maybe I want to do some other retouching things in the same group, so maybe I won't call it handle. We'll group this with itself. I'm going to call this type, all right, and I'll group this with itself, and we're going to call this color. Okay, now let's go into these groups and see what other things we can do. I've got a retouch group here, so why don't we do a little more retouching. We're going to hit S for the clone stamp tool, and I'm going to create a new layer. We're going to sample this point. There we go. And we're going to get rid of, all right, there we go. We're just going to get rid of that little spot. We're going to use our healing brush. We'll get rid of that little spot. Let's say we want to get rid of these little things too. Very, very quick here. Healing brush, sampling, and then painting. This, this is the sort of thing that you can really knock out in just a couple minutes, getting rid of all these kind of little things that are going to wind up distracting the viewer from seeing the image a little bit better. All right, so all those little things I would consider retouching. They're not retouching my subject, but they're retouching our background. So that's all going to go inside of the retouch. All right, type's got its own. Now let's say that I've got a couple layers of type. I want to duplicate this layer, truck. What's the next thing that comes to your mind? Dog? Doll. There we go. Doll. The new single by Truck Doll. She's so hot right now. Truck Doll. I feel like this should be a lot bigger. There we go. Truck Doll. Yeah, there's some graphic designers out there loving this. There we go, Truck Doll. So we want to group those together. And let's say that I want to keep all my type. Grouping is fine, but let's say I want to color code it as well, right? I want Truck Doll. I want that to stand out. So I'm going to click right here on this eyeball. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to go to red. Okay? So now I've got a couple different groups, and each is color coded too. I can color code any of these if I'd like. So my type, I'm going to have that visible. And let's say I had a bunch of different type in here. It would all be getting the same red treatment as well. So I could very easily tell what's inside of a group, what's outside of a group. And if I had type in a different place in my image, let's say I had a few different groups of type, I could color all of those groups red. So I would know that, type is always going to be red. And then you can create your own little systems to say, like, if I'm going to retouch something, I'm going to make that a green group. So that every time you open up Photoshop, you start retouching, you make it green. So that when you come back to those files at a later date, you go green, retouching, red, type. And these things will become second nature to you. So whatever makes that a little bit easier for you. All right, coloring. We've got some color going on here on our lips. Let's just create another levels adjustment layer on the top of there. And we'll go to our blue channel. There we go. And pull up our shadows and our highlights. But you know what? I have got to get rid of that gradient overlay on our type because it looks horrible. All right, Not hard to do. Just click on your type. We've got doll here. Double tap on your FX, which brings up our layer effects, and we can just turn off our gradient overlay. Not a problem. Let's do the same thing over here. You can actually do it right over here. Gradient overlay, you can turn that off. You can turn any of these on and off, just as you need to do. All right, now let's say we did want to do one more thing, and that is to use, so we've got layers, we've got masks, we've got groups. Let's get into the masks a little bit more. Let's say we have our type, but I want to put a layer mask onto my type. Maybe I wanted to fade out. This is going to look horrible, but I'm going to do it anyway. I want it to fade out. So instead of placing a layer mask on any of those individual layers, I can just do it on the entire group. So we'll place a layer mask on the group, which is then going to mask out everything inside of the group. So now I'm going to grab my gradient tool, and we're just going to paint up from the bottom, and we're going to fade out truck doll. Let's just pretend that this does not look horrible, because it does. Let's make it a lot smaller. We'll put it here on the. There we go. That's getting a little bit better. I'm not doing myself any favors here with truck doll. All right, let's go to character. I'm going to change the spacing in between these letters down from. There we go. Down from 300 spacing between the letters to 100. All right. There we go. And you can see at any point in time, I can change any of these things where they are, my layer masking, as well as the layer effects, things like that. So working with layers is a really great way to keep things organized, and the future me is going to look at this and be really impressed that I did this in just a couple of minutes.